Ukraine. And I should tell you, we're going to be talking in a mix of Ukrainian and English, for those of you who've not yet got a headset. Secondly, José Manuel Entrecanales, who's Chairman and CEO of ACCIONA. Let's move on now to Nicolas Brusson, who's co-founder and CEO of BlaBlaCar.
Qui allez-vous retrouver? BlaBlaCar, partout où il y a une route.
And finally, and you heard, of course, him mentioned in the opening video before the Prime Minister spoke, Vasyl, who is founder of the UFuture investment group. Welcome to you all. Let's get going. We're talking until 11:30, so we've got an hour and 20 minutes with the Prime Minister here for the next 25 minutes. Alex, let me come to you first. I'd like to hear from each of you quickly what you're doing in Ukraine, what you're investing in Ukraine, and literally just a minute, if I can. Alex, please.
So we're involved, first of all, it's a privilege to be here today, and I'm excited to join the forum. Thank you for having GE. All of our businesses are involved in Ukraine right now. We're working with the Ukraine Railways and Transportation. We are working with DTEC and other partners on renewable energy and wind farms. We are working on gas pipelines with our oil and gas business. Our healthcare business is proud to be partnering with many institutions across the country to improve cancer and heart care. And our aviation business is proud to have been a partner with Ukrainian International Airways and now with SkyUp. And so we're actively involved across all the industries in Ukraine and excited to be doing so.
And in a tough market, you've just, according to my Financial Times this morning, you've done well in Iraq, beating Siemens to a big deal there.
Well, you know, we've had some interesting news over the past year, and so it's nice to have some good news this week. Thanks for noticing that.
Good. Jose, ACCIONA, I mean, here we are talking about sustainability at a time less than a week ago when the IPCC in Korea was giving a doomsday warning about how important sustainability is. What is your engagement here in Ukraine?
Our main activity here is renewables. We're developing photovoltaic and wind power. And as you say, the situation, as has been advised by the IPCC, is getting dire, is getting very difficult. This country in particular has made a significant effort over the past 15 years, which quite a remarkable reduction in emissions of about 30%, with, at the same time, a very remarkable growth in GDP of about 50%, which is quite an impressive decoupling of growth and emissions. However, this country has a 11% objective for 2020 with the COP15, which is going to be challenging to reach, and the 35% reduction in emissions for 2035, which is also going to be difficult. So that's what we're here for, to contribute to that project.
So you're saying really the urgency is there, which is an opportunity, a business opportunity?
Huge business opportunity, huge urgency.
All right. Nicolas, tell us not just about BlaBlaCar, which you co-founded, we saw all these statistics up there, but also what you bring to BlaBlaCar and what you've done in Silicon Valley and the kind of risks and innovation and startups that you've been involved in.
Yeah, so thanks for having me on the panel, first of all. So maybe as a quick step back, what we do at BlaBlaCar. So BlaBlaCar is a long-distance carpooling service. So essentially we allow drivers to share their ride when they drive between cities, and passengers can book a seat in this car and travel together, sharing the cost of the journey. So that's something we started about 10 years ago in France. We started to expand internationally around 2011, 2012, mostly in Europe. And we started Ukraine actually technically in 2014, toward the end of 2014, which was obviously a complex time actually to launch Ukraine. During the first year, we did not really invest that much, so in 2015, and we really started to invest in Ukraine about 2 years ago, in 2016. And we've seen phenomenal growth in Ukraine. So today we have, here you could see the global numbers, but we have over 4 million people actually signed up to the service in Ukraine. So to put that in perspective, that's not far from 10% of the population signing up to a new mobility service in 2 years, which is pretty astonishing. And it's, for us, the fastest growth country out of 22 countries we operate on a global scale. So,
and quickly, how would you describe the innovation scene, the startup scene, not just in Ukraine but elsewhere? How tough is it? Did you have doubts that BlaBla would take off?
So we had very strong doubts at the beginning. If I walk back in time, even 10 years ago, when we launched in France, no one believed it would take off in France. And we had the same story for every country where we launched. In terms of tech and innovation, I think if you look at the last 3 or 4 years, on a global scale, you had like maybe the biggest investment in all tech history going into startups. So almost every year we're beating the amount of investment going into tech. On a global scale, you see that in Europe, and you also see that in Ukraine. And Ukraine for us is interesting because you have the right mix of a pretty big domestic market, where it's pretty big land and it's 45 million people, lots of tech talent, and political will to make it happen. So for us it's a very interesting playground actually, not just to launch the service and get consumer traction, but also to see that it's easy to innovate and launch new services in Ukraine.
All right, I'll come back to all of you and ask you about the innovation environment and the startup environment. Vasyl, let me come to you now. You have an enormous amount invested, you're taking big risks in this country with your UFuture group. How would you describe the risks you're taking and how the environment is or is not changing?
It's really pleasant for me to see that Ukrainian business is not only using the innovations but creating innovations also. And as for my business personally, I invest mostly into the production, into the manufacturing, and it has 2 main challenges. This is the robot techniques and artificial intelligence. So I consider that number 1, what we should deal with is our innovations, the creation of the teams. If we can create the self-learning team which is trying to find opportunities and which is rather flexible, then we will be able to survive during this competition, because any innovation which we can acquire now, if we begin to implement it for the team which is not perfect, which is maybe an obsolete team, it will give us only a certain part or a certain temporary advantage. But we have an economic forum, so I'd like to say the following, that the majority of Ukrainian huge companies are using innovative approaches, and unfortunately unfortunately, I need to admit that very soon they will cut their job places. So here we have the Prime Minister, so I'd like to come to you with a request. Please support the SME, because only the small and medium enterprises can create 1,000 companies, which on their own will create millions of job places, and with the help of that they will balance. Undoubtedly, this should be an innovative business, so we can see we have startups which has achieved the best moped in the world. We need to support it, we need to make it in our country, we need to create new opportunities.
I'm about to ask the Prime Minister this question as well, but let me just quote to you, if I can, Vasyl, about what the World Bank said literally 2 days ago. A more challenging global environment for emerging markets, Vasyl first. The difficulties now facing emerging markets, and also Ukraine having tremendous potential to boost exports of higher value products, but this potential has not been realized. How is that going to happen?
Well, we will not deceive ourselves, because 5 years ago even I was going and said, please come to us, we have cheap and low, cheap salary and intellectuals, but it's not working today. Today we need to train our young colleagues and the engineers who create new opportunities. For instance, I have a partner in Germany and I wanted him to come to Ukraine and to create a factory here, and he said, Vasyl, at my factory, which manufactures 70 million euro of turnover, I have 35 people only. The advantage only in Ukraine that you have the cheap labor force, well, it's not an advantage, because all of the factories we are creating according to the new technologies only. And of course this is the manufacturing which there are no 10,000 or 5,000 of people, only 100 to 150, most of the engineers are working there. I think it's also an opportunity. It's also a value, and the more we have such manufacturing, the powerful will be our country.
So, Prime Minister, we heard you in your opening remarks talking very optimistically about new opportunities which are there to be exploited. But I put to you this sobering assessment which we heard at the World Bank IMF meeting and has been confirmed specifically for Ukraine about the difficulties now for emerging markets. How are you and your government going to handle this, given that the IMF is saying we're still not moving fast enough?
Thank you for your question. I'm an optimist, and I'm a realist, and it's a very rare mix. But what I said here is that what I believe in and what we see, those tendencies, those trends which are happening here in Ukraine today. So my speech was focused upon the strengthening and facilitating of economic growth, and for that we need new investments. Well, undoubtedly we need new technologies, and not only the technologies which we can take somewhere, but I think that lots of people will agree that today Ukraine is a very powerful country, a powerful player in the sphere of innovations, and in fact we are a very dynamically growing country in this sector. So we are present, in fact, all over the world of the manufacturing of the most contemporary products. And the IT sector is seriously growing. We can see plus 20% annually. And now as for the international financial institutions, well, again, I don't doubt that everyone who has his or her own business, they face their challenges and opportunities. And Ukraine, as of 2014, had the loss of the 1/5 of the national economy. We understand the reasons. And the full blockage of the traditional markets. Energy aggression, I would say, from the Russian Federation, and, what's the most important, as a consequence of unthoughtful state policy. From 2005 till 2013, there was the state debt created as for $50 billion, which is a very serious burden for Ukraine. And this is the problem. How can we overcome them? with a systematic management of those challenges in the future. This is the first point. And the most important, we can overcome those challenges when our growth is rather stable and rapid, I mean the economic one. And we can speak about different spheres here. We understand that the new technologies are in the conflict with the number of job places. But it means that we have lots of other sectors. So if we look to the official statistical data, the unemployment is decreasing in Ukraine officially. So it tells us that in the medium-term perspective we'll have a deficit of the labor force. So I don't agree that we should speak about the cheap labor force. I would like to speak about the worthy paid and highly efficient, productive working force, which can bring success to those investments which are implemented and coming to Ukraine. And that is why in my speech I said that we are beginning increasing the investments into the education sphere, into the development of the human capital. So, we will not hide the fact that we've begun the very high-scale and wide-scale reform, the reform of decentralization implementation, about the SMEs, that we gave an opportunities to our regions and communities to involve investments, to modernize the infrastructure, to create the conditions for the business. So overall, it will lead to the growth, and we will be able to manage the challenges and to fight those chronic diseases or problems which have been created before us, but we have to overcome them.
Prime Minister, we may have to have the debate about skills and labour in a moment after you've left, but can I just pursue that point about what the IMF and the World Bank are saying? The market out there, the financial markets, the world economy, is no longer as robust when it comes to investment, particularly in emerging economies, and Ukraine is just one of scores. What I'm saying to you is, in addition to what you've said already, don't you have to say to those out there, you've got to use even more imagination now, that the paradigm is shifting, the realities are shifting when it comes to a willingness to invest. We are seeing even the big funds saying there's less money going in, even in the developed world. And therefore the realities are changing, even if your ambitions are quite understandable, optimistic and achievable by current standards. Things potentially are changing.
Undoubtedly, there are lots of challenges we're facing, and the markets are changing, the reality is changing, and the threats and hazards which the world faces today are really unprecedented in this historical cycle. But again, I emphasize that the investments will always search for the place where they will be, or they will have the maximum of efficiency and where they will be protected. So our task, having all of the challenges we are seeing in the world economy, our task is to create the conditions under which the investments will be profitable into Ukraine, I mean. So I know how today's world is developing, and we understand which potential opportunities can be found in the developed economies as for the investments. So we see that Ukraine is rather competitive in that. Moreover, we have certain spheres which have 10 times or 12 times more potential of growth. So I consider that today, if we try to find such countries in Europe, it's rather complicated. So business will invest there where it feels the profitability and competitiveness. And this is an obvious fact. But the thing which global economy will overcome different periods, well, of course, no one doubts in that. Thank you.
Right. Prime Minister, while you're here, let me ask the other members of the panel to just enter that debate about labour, about how many workers you need, about cheap labour, about how you can set up a factory or some kind of operation with very small numbers of high-quality labour. And picking up Vasyl's challenge, support SMEs. Alex, what do you see as the global environment in which Ukraine is now sitting on these critical issues of getting high value from labour, but also high value from AI, of algorithms, and the new realities of how you can create an operation, but maybe with not much labour?
Well, to be honest with you, if you look at the team that we have in Ukraine, I put our team in Ukraine up against any team that we have in the think that's a sign of the great innovation. I think that's a sign of the IT skills and the analytics skills that potential partners and employees have in Ukraine, and we're very excited about the future. When I look at our success in Ukraine over the last 5 years, and we are very excited about our future in Ukraine, we really look to the strength of our partnerships and the ability to localize. I already mentioned that we're partnering with DTEC and renewable energy. We're also partnering with KBSZ on modernizing the national locomotive fleet. And again, I think the ability to localize and tap into local markets is one of the more attractive indicia of how receptive a company or a country is to investments from companies like GE. I think that the more important point, and I'd quibble a little bit with something that you said a minute ago. I'm not so sure that there's less money to be invested to fix this infrastructure gap that we see around the world, because there are export credit agencies that are eager to support development in countries like Ukraine. There are sovereign wealth funds out of China and elsewhere who are very interested in funding infrastructure investments. Banks are looking at new types of debt instruments. The issue is that the standards for bankability, for financeability are increasing. And what is increasingly important is that companies like ours can work with local partners to develop bankable projects and financeable projects and that meet the standards that the world is going to be imposing on Ukraine and other emerging markets.
Could I just quickly though, I mean GE has been going, and you hinted at it in your first answer, has been going through a challenging, tough time in global markets, and under your previous chief executive, even Jeff Immelt was saying, we've got to reconfigure, we've got to reassess how we operate, how we're configured and so on. You've moved your headquarters and so on. But help us understand how even you, as a well-known major global corporate, have had to reconfigure and make yourself more nimble in this new paradigm that is shifting so fast.
Well, again, so actually the global markets have been a huge strength for GE. And I think that if you look at the ratio of our sales outside of the United States versus inside the United States, that's flip-flopped in the last 15 years. It used to be 60-40 in favor of US, and now it's 35-65 in favor of global sales. So global markets have actually been an enormous strength for us, which is why we're so excited to be in countries like Ukraine. It requires decentralizing our decision-making, but it also requires engaging locally, working with leaders like the Prime Minister about transparency, about rule of law, about making sure that standards are put into place. A challenge, by the way, which is in no way unique to Ukraine. It's shared across the world, including in my own country, the United States. The need to promote the rule of law and create an environment where investors have the certainty they require to make investments in their country's future.
We've got 5 minutes before the Prime Minister leaves. Jose, as well, this issue of nimbleness in a fast-changing global environment, how that has to be handled by major corporations and startups as well.
Well, let me go back one step and say how we look at business and we look at opportunities. One of the mega trends that we're now seeing from the point of view of multinational corporations is we have a global view of the world. And there is no longer, or the difficulty, the traditional difficulty that there would be, that would exist about approaching a new country or a new region in the world is pretty much done and over with. We don't see a difficulty in deciding whether we're going to do business, or a great difficulty. There are some limitations, but nonetheless, in general, there is no difficulty in attempting a new market, attempting a new region, a new culture. So we look at the world and say, where are they? Where is the best equation, risk-return equation possible? So we say, okay, well, this is the risk elements of this particular region, and the return side of that equation is so-so. That answer's good. I think that's a place to invest. That's how we look at Ukraine, like any other place, but that's how we look at Ukraine. Ukraine has a very good equation, has a very attractive balance of risk-return. Ukrainians need to naturally keep on working like any other country, like any other region, need to be working on the risk side. So the risk side needs to be maintained and has to be reduced to the extent possible. And the risk side is, there are many factors, but one of the key factors within our capacity to control is legal reliability, the environmental elements, political stability, all those elements that are very important parts of the equation. So, as an investor, that's what I see, that this region, this country has a particular advantage. With one additional very important element, which is talent. This country has more talent, and you were mentioning emerging markets, this country has more talent than you will normally find in emerging markets. So that is an additional value that we see. Now, in my particular, and with this I'm finishing, in my particular sector, in infrastructures, there is also a huge opportunity because the unbalance between the development of the country and the availability of infrastructures, particularly in renewable energy and transport, distribution of electricity, you name it, is considerable. So there is a huge opportunity.
Can we talk detail in a moment? The Prime Minister has to leave in about 4 minutes. Nicolas, can you just crystallise the challenges for any country now, any emerging country, which the Prime Minister can take back to his office, based on your experience?
Yeah, I'm just going to react on, given we have only 1 minute, on the question of talent, right? Because I think that's one of the key if you want to grow in technology. Clearly what we found is Ukraine has tons of talent. And I think the way you should see that, and I think you mentioned that earlier, it's not about low-cost labor, essentially. It's about like good labor, it's about smart people. And if you look at our space, so it's not the old economy, obviously, it's actually digital revolution. We look for developers, we look for good engineers. Today, in Europe, in the US, you have a complete shortage of engineers. So the reality is most people now look at countries like Ukraine, and Ukraine is very specifically because you have smart engineers and good developers, because you have smart developers, not because you have cheap developers, which is probably very different from the perspective from like 10 years ago. In terms of investment, so you have the sort of global view, and I'm not a macroeconomist, but if you look in technology, and in particular in digital, investment has increased a lot on a global scale, and it has increased a lot, I don't have the exact numbers, in Ukraine as well. So the way we get into Ukraine was by acquiring a small company, a local entrepreneur that's still running actually BlaBlaCar in Ukraine. So for us, all the staff in Ukraine has been hired locally, not we just brought people from Europe to Ukraine.
Thank you, Nicolas. And Prime Minister, finally, before you leave, let me just put to you one of the points that the IMF makes, because there are a good number of foreign investors here sitting in the audience. They say, the IMF say, there are still too many economic incentives to being corrupt in this country. How much is that really still a real drag on the potential?
Well, thank you very much. Well, I do believe that in every corner of the world, and if we take any country, we understand that the corruption can actually ruin the development and takes out the development that can be strategical for Ukraine. So Ukraine in the last recent 4 years has created the new legislation on corruption, first of all on fighting the corruption, first of all. And the most recent innovation was the creating the independent anti-corruption court, and I do hope it's going to be a very significant and tool to fight corruption, and we have a quite fundamental and defined position. If you have violated, if you have conducted a crime, you will have the responsibility in the face of the independent anti-corruption court. And we are now building the capacity of all of our anti-corruption structure, and we have done a very serious step in that, fighting corruption. But there is another point, preventing corruption. And there is a question on regulations, there is a question on creating the absolutely new bases in the economical environment. And just yesterday we have had the inspectional forum. So starting from the 1st January of 2019, we're starting to take down this obsolete controlling system in country that was basically the repressing system. It's going to be the new system of monitoring and control. It's going to be market-oriented. It's going to be amicable for us to provide the high quality of the business conduction in Ukraine. We're speaking of risks. We understand the risks are all over the world, and investment is always about risking. But if we just try to consider the risks and the possibility of income, then Ukraine is going to be in the winning situation. And even though that we have some spheres in our life, in our countries, and starting with the Ukrainian natural resources and ending with the Ukrainian space resources that have really huge potential for growth and innovation, if we multiply it on the talent that our international partner have mentioned, and we do understand it obviously is like that, Ukraine has tons of talent, then we can be quite strong and competitive. But speaking of our collaboration with the international world, we have the Vice President of General Electric, and I would like to emphasize that we have signed up an agreement for our strategic collaboration. And what are we based on? We're based on the using of their technologies and the localization of production in Ukraine. For more than 40% is going to be the co-production that is going to be done jointly. We're going to become the part of the global world in this direction, in this dimension. And we have a lot of issues like this. And just to sum up, there's one thing that I want to outline also. We have pretty good and competent fiscal legislation. We're definitely going to continue to work in the transparency direction. The rule of law is going to be enforced and empowered. The rule of law, and I already have said about it, we're going to improve the situation. So we're now on a way of the systematic development. We have to make more impact of every one of us should have more impact for us to make this development faster. And what our international partners have said that they have an interest in Ukraine. It gives us an understanding that their future business is connected with the future of Ukraine, and it inspires us once again, because now we can think it inspires us.
З точки зору зростання економіки, зміни середовища, ми говоримо, що наше майбутнє є достатньо оптимістичним. Ми впораємося зі всіма проблемами. Ми вийдемо з цих проблем сильнішими. Я хочу ще раз сказати, що
with something that I've started with, actually. Ukraine is growing and will keep on growing. And our brand is not only the branding of Ukraine, for Ukraine to be recognizable in the world, but it is a clear message to all of the world. Ukraine now. It is now that we have to invest. It is now that we have to develop the economics. Now we have to create the new opportunities. And what is most important, the investments are changing Ukraine. The faster we will grow, the more investment we will have from the inside of the country and from the outside of the country. And the faster we will change and the faster we will meet our goals. Economical stability, sustainable development and strong national economy. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a productive day at this forum. Thank you very much for organizing it. But now I have to leave, unfortunately, to continue working together with the members of the Ukrainian Parliament to keep on working on the budget for 2019. Thank you for your attention.
Prime Minister, thank you very much. We've got 50 minutes to run and plenty to discuss to build on what the Prime Minister said, the optimism that the Prime Minister's got with those who are up on the platform. Vasyl, let me come to you next. And in pharmaceuticals, you're investing in innovation parks in particular, in a country which is still struggling with poverty and significant demographic issues. But the reason I ask this is, how much now are your innovation parks and those innovation initiatives really acting as a multiplier for skills, for the next generation, but also for the existing generation who need to reassign their capacities in a way which is more productive in this international market now?
Unfortunately, there is a little bit of a bad news in this position because currently a lot of people have left Ukraine, a lot of good professionals have left Ukraine. And what if we have seen in the recent times, we have seen that the very talented teams are leaving Ukraine. And that is something that really bothers us and really concerns us. Yes, we'll build in the industrial parks, we'll build in the high technologies part, the unit city. And our main aim is to create the conditions for the Ukrainian young talented people to stay in Ukraine, for them to create the new powerful teams, for them to succeed here, for them here to create the product, and for us not to sell the raw commodities for the export, but to sell the product. And unfortunately, the Prime Minister has left because one of my main messages is about the investors that I have 5 investors, and when they come to Ukraine, they call me and they ask me, how are you doing? And I have 2 choices. I can say that everything's good, we have a lot of opportunities in place, we earn a lot of money, everything is good, and then they will come to me. Or I have the other choice, saying like the situation is bad, we don't know the political situation, lots of corruption in place, and they won't come. Thus, my main message for the Prime Minister, unfortunately he will not hear it, but that's the foreign investments is very cool. We need foreign investments, but we also need the skills, not only the money. And I would like to pay the attention of the government now to the support of the Ukrainian investors. If Ukrainian investors is going to be successful, if Ukrainian investor will feel comfortable here, then the foreign investors will also come to us. So this is the main message. Let us do the good conditions for the foreign investments. First of all, we have to create good conditions for Ukrainian investors. We have to make the credit rates, the interest rates lower, and make it interesting. The foreign investors are looking for partnerships. I have a lot of foreign investors that are ready to come to Ukraine, but the risks are high in Ukraine. That is why we need a very good, loyal, local partner. So let us think about creating these opportunities to help Ukrainian investors, both big and small.
You talk about labour and those leaving the country. What about attracting labour back? Because there is an incredible repatriation of cash from Ukrainians who are outside the country. What is needed from these investors to bring people back into the country, to say this is the place now to be an IT developer, to be a developer with these kind of SMEs, with startups and so on? What will bring them back? I know the Prime Minister's not here, but what will bring them back in your view?
Well, just the new opportunities to be successful in our country. And I would like to speak maybe about the competition here, whether the competition grows currently in Ukraine, whether it grows or decreases. Of course it grows. Because if we take a look at the world situation, then 99% of the economy in the world was in deficit. If we had $100, then $80, $90 we had the products on, and the consumer was the main. So they were walking around and searching for the goods. In last 10, 20 years, world economy is profit economy. For the $100 of the consumer has a $300 worth of the goods. So if we take a real look, it's not about, we don't have the customers, we actually have the person who makes the choice. They come to the supermarket, they have a lot of products in place and they choose. So we have the choice maker. So in order for us to be the competitor, we need to have 4 things. First of all, to produce the product on the low cost. High quality products with the low cost. The third point, it has to be nicely looking, and we have to provide additional services. And this is everything that we can do currently in Ukraine. And as soon as we start doing this, the people will see the opportunities and the people will come back. But before that, first, one thing that I would like to do is to stop the people who would like to live. I would like to create these opportunities for them to be successful here. And our company is currently working on that, from preventing people to live.
But I want to come back, because I had to cut you a bit short because the Prime Minister was leaving. But you have an extraordinary career so far. You've got a career of someone almost much older than you, given the enormity of what you've done. It's not just about BlaBla. It's what you've done in Silicon Valley. It's also what you've done on venture capital and investment, and the smartness of what is needed to be opportunistic in this new environment, both as an executive and an investor. Help us understand more, not just about BlaBla, but let's think more broadly about how Ukraine, with its 127,000 IT developers, how there's this need to attract. You were lucky enough to be in the Valley when things were moving in an incredible direction. Even the Valley has problems now of the ethical side of development, of the next generation, maybe not so comfortable. They love the salaries, but not really feeling comfortable with some of the stuff that's going on. Help us understand the way this paradigm is shifting so dramatically, and whether that needs to be modified in Ukrainian minds as well.
Yeah, I think the thing to understand is it takes time to create an ecosystem. So we often talk about Silicon Valley, but Silicon Valley has been going on for 40 years. It's called Silicon Valley because it started with semiconductor back in the 70s. So in Silicon Valley, you have everything, right? So you have the talent, not just from Silicon Valley. If you work in any startup in Silicon Valley, they're not from the US, they're clearly not from California. You know, they come from Europe, they come from all over the world, they come from India, they come from China. So you have a very strong ecosystem. Most European countries need to recognize it takes time to create an ecosystem.
But now does Ukraine have that time at the moment?
So today, would you say like Ukraine as an ecosystem? Not yet. Do you see here the ingredients for an ecosystem? Yes, part of, right? You see the talents. So if you don't have talents and good education in the country, so the fact that you have people leaving is a problem, but at least you educate people and you have good people to start with, on which you can create technology companies. So I think you have that in Ukraine. As I mentioned earlier, you need political will. So if I look at the example of France, clearly Macron had very strong political will around technology, and now you see that actually there's more investment, venture capital investment in France than any other country in Europe. It was not the case 5 years ago. So you see the creation of an ecosystem. You need investors, and not just local investors, you need foreign investors. So the question is like, how do you attract US venture capital firms or European venture capital firms to invest in Ukraine? I think it's slowly happening, but it's still like very much the beginning. I would say Ukraine is not part of, if you come from Silicon Valley as a VC, where do you stop in Europe? Probably not yet in Ukraine. You're probably going to stop in London, in Stockholm, you're going to stop in Paris now, you're going to stop in Berlin, but that's pretty much it. So Ukraine has to be on the map, right? That's the good way to think of it. Like, if a VC comes from California, is going to make a stop in Ukraine, yes or no? Today, maybe not, probably not. And then you need also to welcome foreign investment in a sense of like companies setting up shop in your country. So for like whenever like new players are coming in like us, essentially either we feel welcome and we're going to hire talent, and then we're going to essentially even bring talent back to Ukraine. So as an example, she's here in the room actually, but we hired someone from Ukraine in Paris. When we set up shop in Ukraine, she moved back to Ukraine. So you have like talent going back because there is a good company, because there is like a prospect of growth in Ukraine. So I think once you have all these elements, talent, which you have in Ukraine, international investment coming in, and a good, financial investment coming in, but also like foreign companies able to thrive and set up shop in Ukraine. It takes time, but after a few years, if you have strong political will, you do create an ecosystem. So I think we are at the beginning of the creation of that ecosystem in Ukraine.
But Nicolas, you keep saying it takes time. There are those who say that time is getting shorter and shorter in terms of public expectations, and the expectations on the political class to deliver, not just in Ukraine, but everywhere. And that's what we're seeing across Europe at the moment. The pushback in Hungary, we're seeing the pushback in Poland, and in France as well now, because Macron is not really delivering at the speed he said he would. In other words, time, there may be a logic to the time, but actually the public gets impatient much faster. Although that's a slight contradiction, it gets impatient much faster. And therefore there's an even greater imperative to develop along the lines you're suggesting. How would you say this can be resolved in a country like Ukraine?
No, you're right, it's a challenge. I think when I say it takes time, you need to recognize that, again, to create like a complete tech ecosystem where you invest in early companies, early entrepreneurs, the time it takes to build a company from inception to becoming IPO or being sold, it's not a couple of years. Like if you look at venture capital investment, they tend to invest for like on average 5-7 years. So between the time you put money in the ground as a VC or as an angel investor and the time you can prove that it's been a good investment and you want to try again and you have this snowball effect, the cycles, they're not like 1 or 2 year cycles, they're more like 4 or 5 year cycles. And I'm not sure you accelerate that. I mean, you can paralyze, you can create like more companies and larger incubators and bring back talent actually faster. But the proof point of your investment actually makes sense. I would say still takes 4 to 5 years, even in Silicon Valley, by the way.
And just say, Alex, contribute on this issue of innovation, the speed that's necessary. We're talking about sustainability and the climate change catastrophe potentially. That is creating already greater public imperative, not just in Ukraine but elsewhere. Jose, just let us understand where you're coming from here about this speed, because I pick up on time, it takes time. But in many ways, what you're doing on sustainability, there ain't that time at the moment for that kind of level of leisure to think about what to do. It's got to be done.
Yeah, no, and it's a very interesting point, the one that you were bringing, the one that you were discussing right now, because there's a constraint, there's two constraints. One is the one you're mentioning on climate change and how that's going to affect our environment, our life environment. I wasn't referring to the natural environment. The natural environment is also going to be affected, but our life environment is going to be hugely affected. But there's also the element of how how do we close the wealth gap? And how do we get this wealth element very urban, very concentrated, that technology is bringing to countries like Ukraine? How do we spread it around? Because the truth is that if we don't, this growth pattern, the instability, political instability, the claims of those who have not been benefited by this technological boom is going to make it impossible. And this is a very good example. This country is a very good example for that. So my view then in that particular subject affects also the climate change issue. We have two pressing necessities in Western society, of which Ukraine is a great example. We have a social demand for growth, that it's spread around, that it reaches as many people as possible, that doesn't leave behind the rural areas, that doesn't concentrate only on urban areas, that is not circumscribed to sophisticated, well-educated people, that can access less educated people. All that needs to be done. At the same time, we have the climate change issue. And those two elements, those two requirements, are actually attacked, solved, partially solved at least, by the same solution, or the same therapy, which is infrastructures. We need infrastructures. Infrastructures is energy infrastructures. We need to substitute energy infrastructures. We need to do transport infrastructures. We need to do quality of life infrastructures in towns. We need to have agricultural infrastructures. We need to have water infrastructures. We need to have infrastructures of all types to distribute wealth. At the same time, those infrastructures are the ones that are going to give us sustainability, reliability, mitigation, adaptation, transformation. There's a good word for that, SMART. Sustainability, mitigation, adaptation, resilience, and transformation. SMART. Those infrastructures need to be put in place to solve those two challenges that the world is facing very badly.
Alex, let me just pick up on that, can you?
You know, I think that you also have to have a balance of being realistic when you approach this issue too. What's happening?
What do you mean by realistic?
Well, I think you have to understand that there's a tremendous amount of innovation that's going on in the energy industry throughout the world and in the generation of power. And what we see in Ukraine is representative of what's happening around the world. We are already seeing an industry where over half the new added power generation capacity is renewables in the form of wind or solar. But at the same time, conventional sources are going to continue to be part of the solution for energy for the foreseeable future. So it calls for a mix between developing wind and solar, but also working with conventional sources, coal, steam, nuclear, gas, to improve and reduce emissions from those sources at the same time. And that's the type of balance that's going to have to be struck here in Ukraine as well as elsewhere in the world. I do think that we also have to bear in mind that while the developing world is talking about the need for cleaner energy, there's still a third of the world that does not have electricity. And we have to continue to work on technologies to go from centralized conventional sources of power to distributed sources of power or microgrids that will enable electricity to reach that third of the world that still needs power. And again, that's a long-term proposition, not something that's going to be solved overnight, and it's going to take sustained, intelligent investment in Ukraine as elsewhere. I think the one area where there is a need for speed and a missed opportunity is in digitization. And I believe that the edge technology that is available right now, in terms of sensors that can be installed on power generation equipment and in the grids, offers immediate, fast returns. I think that when you look at the talent and data analytics that we have here in Ukraine and elsewhere, there is a tremendous opportunity to optimize how equipment is used and optimize delivery of power through the grid. And that's an area where I believe the entire world needs to be moving more quickly.
Let me give each of you a challenge, and I'm going to be pretty blunt here and say there are 5 men sitting up here in dark suits and ties. There are no women, and also the next generation is getting impatient. And I'm wondering if we're reflecting adequately the pressure now on the political class to deliver the expectations, and obviously the Prime Minister is, if you like, on the cusp between the two generations, but the expectations out there. And I'm wondering, Vasyl, what your assessment is there for Ukraine of whether the next generation will want to come back, whether the next generation will stay, whether those who are out there in the less privileged parts of your country will feel energized by what is happening, or whether there's a danger that this will only be something where there's development and there's a paradigm shift within a certain group of the country. Question for you, Vasyl.
Well, first of all, you asked Nicolas the question, what should be done with those IT specialists or companies which today don't feel comfortable and who are in the Silicon Valley. I would like to say to those IT experts or to those companies who don't feel comfort in the Silicon Valley, please come to Ukraine, sure. And we'll create the unit city here. We have the ecosystem here, which will be super comfortable. So please invest your knowledge into our country. We consider to be moving along the innovative road. As for your question, well, look what we see today when the growth of IT experts is present. Today, and in the Soviet times, we had a very powerful mathematician and engineer school. So, according to the Initiator, it still exists. So, IT specialists from ours are mostly programmers. And we need to give additional training like entrepreneurship and business management, because the main task of ours is not to write codes and ciphers for other companies, but to create products and startups. And those startups have to be in our country, have to be located here. So, if we add to rather high level of education a piece of entrepreneurship and business, will create conditions for our talents to create companies, and those companies would generate some new technologies and we would sell them later on. Then, of course, our talents from abroad will gradually see opportunities here and come back.
I mean, where is the best way for talent to develop? We're meeting the week with Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft, with Bill Gates, died at the age of 65, and look where they developed their business. Is it actually in industrial parks, or is it in attics and bed sits with a laptop? What would you say, Nicolas, given what you've seen and the experience? Does it need a Ukrainian Silicon Valley? I don't know what you call it, a Silicon Step or something, but or maybe we can generate a new label here at this meeting. But what does it require? Is there a paradigm? Is there a model yet?
So maybe two things on that. I mean, I don't believe there is a model, and whenever people try to replicate Silicon Valley, they forget that Silicon Valley was not the government mandate. It just happened, right? So, and I'm not saying you should wait for things to happen, but it's always difficult to force an ecosystem. You should sort of let it grow and create the conditions around it, like the political, investment, tax, talent, education conditions, so that it creates itself. In terms of attracting talent, I think you also have like a generational thing around startups. So if you look at the average age at BlaBlaCar, I haven't checked recently, but it's probably 31-year-old, 31, 32-year-old max. In the early days, it was even less than 30-year-old average. So we attract lots of talents that are really millennials, and they really feel like they fit into that new generation. They want to do something good actually for society. And I think if you look at most like incubators and startups, actually, especially the digital space, those are pretty young folks. And if you don't have like a good story to attract them back of changing the country, doing some good, they might not come back. So I think it's also like targeting people of a specific generation, like the 25, 30-ish year old, essentially, and having a good story for them to be entrepreneurs and to change things in the country is going to attract them back, I would think.
Alex, I mean, you are, for want of a better phrase, you represent an enormous legacy corporation, which has been through its own existential challenges of even talk of it being broken up. Now, can you have startups within a major corporation? Is that something that you can do you believe?
We have actually been experimenting with a group called GE Ventures within GE, precisely to incubate startups within our culture, try to get the dynamics of the startup companies. It's working pretty well. We've had a couple of those startups that have since been assimilated in our healthcare business. We've had a number of startups that have been looking at storage technologies that have been since assimilated in our power business. So we're actually pretty excited about how this experience works.
Can you have a startup mentality with people who are drawing a salary in a major corporation?
Absolutely, because I think that in this world where we're more connected than we ever were before and decisions have to be made quickly, you have to be willing to fail fast and understand what's not working and adapt your strategy to change conditions. The world is more connected right now than it ever was before. When a customer is in communication with us from China or from Ukraine or wherever, they expect decisions within minutes, not hours. The old days when you could say that you get back to somebody in 3 weeks are not with us anymore, and that requires a nimble startup mentality. But the other point I wanted to make in response to the issue you raised was the power of inclusion. We see it around the world. And you mentioned that I had just come here from India. We have a multimodal facility in India where 20% of the workers on the shop floor now are female, which is unheard of in India. And that's because GE has created the opportunity for women to participate equally at a high-tech facility. And there's nothing like success that breeds success. When women in India read about how women at GE have won the national welding contest sponsored by the government because of training they received at GE, guess what? We get a lot of women who want to try having their career at GE. So for me, I think that the solution is really to create success that will breed more success. And I already mentioned the importance of localizing. For GE to succeed in Ukraine, that means that we need to create opportunities in Ukraine, both within GE, but with our partners, with our suppliers, and create opportunities for people to participate in the success that results from our joint investments.
Vasyl, is there a model out there, do you think? Is there a danger of there being assumed to be a model? What would you say to this very significant challenge? Because actually, it can be the small, nimble person who's got a great idea, who's actually the person who's going to develop the kind of thing that Vasyl is talking about.
It's obviously difficult to generalize. I mean, each company.
But people are looking for clues here.
Yeah. Well, it depends where you stand. Depends where you stand. Let me tell you my experience. Our experience has been successful in innovation. One of the things we've done, which is we were originally back in the last century. We started as a civil construction company, innovating into renewable energy in the early 90s, when it was truly innovative, and truly innovative, and truly something that was kind of a shot in the sky. And since we've always tried to be innovative, right now the innovation side, taken into the practical terms, is very much related to startups, I must admit. So the advantage that big corporations had 20 years ago, we may not have it so much nowadays. And in the sense that 20 years ago you would get the good ideas and you would be able to implement them earlier than anyone else and get the advantage. Nowadays that's probably not the case. So we need to bring those innovators into our own organization without making them necessarily part of the organization. So we have a program because they don't want to become part of our organization. So we need to absorb the qualities and offer something in exchange. What is it that we can offer in exchange? In our company, we offer them our own ecosystem of development. So say we have a program which is called the Open Innovation, in which we bring those innovators, those startups, and we give them our company to test the products, whether there's maybe drone testing for blades in the turbines, whether it be blockchain projects for qualifying the origin of renewable electricity to our clients, whether it may be all sorts of different projects coming from outside small companies that bring their value and to which we give our own environment, our own ecosystem to test their products. That's a working mechanism. It works actually really well. But it's a difficulty. I mean, we are now facing a situation which is different to what traditional big corporations had, and we are in a less advantageous position, so we need to get our act together.
Alex?
I'd just like to just emphasize innovation is alive and well in large companies too, and I can point to our experience in additive technologies and 3D printing. So this is an area that is relatively new. GE has made a major investment. We have a center of excellence in Munich as well as one in Ohio in this area. Our aviation business has already printed 30,000 component parts that are flight-worthy in the aviation space. And when you see what additive technology can do in terms of liberating designers and manufacturers from the conventional constraints of manufacturing and printing complex geometric parts, it's breathtaking. We're excited about the future. Our customers are excited about the future here. Our latest turboprop engine, I want to make sure I get the number exactly right, has allowed us to take an engine that used to have 845 component parts, and now we were able to print it where it's just 11 component parts. That's a breathtaking change in aviation, and that's a GE. So again, innovation can thrive within a large company as well as a small company as long as you do it the right way. It's not just Silicon Valley. I think we look to Silicon Valley and the places around the world in Ukraine like Silicon Valley to help spark innovation and creativity. But big companies can do it too.
Well, but let me pick up on that other point I made, referring to the 5 sitting in dark suits up here, about the next generation and what you're seeing, because that's at the core of how innovation and startups can work. Now, what are you experiencing in GE about the ability of those who are on a nice salary, have a pretty secure life, their ability also to develop and innovate within that kind of comfortable existence?
Well, I think that's why they come to a company like GE. They want to work on things that matter. When you look at what GE does in terms of flying people safely, helping cure people, helping transport people safely, helping power the world, helping take power to parts of the world that don't have power yet. That's why we come to work every day.
But do they think cutting edge all the time?
I absolutely believe that they think in cutting edge, and they're rewarded for thinking in cutting edge. GE is not perfect. Just like any other institution, there are ways in which we can improve. There are things we can do to incentivize more innovation, more creativity, more of a sense of risk-taking. But when we come to markets like Ukraine, we understand that it's going to take innovation. It's going to take bringing the very best of our science and the very best of our technology. We've been around for 126 years. You don't stick around for 126 years by not being willing to change and adapt to changing circumstances, and that's part of our culture, and it always will be.
That's the fascination with this panel, because Nicolas, given the kind of businesses you have been in and are in now, you have been around for 126 years, it's probably 126 months, and sometimes the half-life of the company is very short, 2 or 3 years. What's your reflection on the ability, and there is in Ukraine a significant legacy of old businesses to adapt internally, particularly taking advantage of the next generation?
Yeah, so I don't think these two things are opposed, meaning like your large companies that have been around for 100 years innovating, they have to, if they don't, they'll die. And GE probably has been around for 126 years, so GE has been innovating, and hopefully will keep on innovating. And then like creating a scene for startups, because I think you need both in a country. So if you look at the US, it's not like large companies don't innovate, they keep on innovating. And it's not like you don't have startups, you do have startups. You need both actually in I would say in a good startup ecosystem, you need both. And by the way, you even need large companies to acquire startups as a way to innovate, because you have two ways to innovate as a large company. Either you do it internally, or you do it by M&A. Google is buying a company every other week, almost, right, in terms of innovation. So Google innovates a lot by M&A. And if you want to create like a healthy tech entrepreneurial ecosystem, you need all of that, and you need like the large companies to innovate and to some extent fuel money or acquire some of the startups.
Vasyl?
I was thinking about it right now when you asked the question, and the truth is that I think we're in a very advantageous position. I mean, we large corporations, all corporations, if you have naturally the right attitude, there is a risk, very big risk, which is the incumbent, the conundrum of the incumbent. If you're the incumbent and you are seeing your business threatened, you try to protect yourself, and you often don't embrace the disruptive element that is affecting, that is disrupting your business. And that is a classic in the large corporation risk. But if you're either capable of embracing that disruptive force, or there is no disruptive force, there is simply lack of it, there is simply a normal business circumstance where your business is not being challenged by a disruptive force, then your situation is incredibly advantageous. Let me give you an example. Urban mobility. We just launched in Madrid, and we're going to continue launching in different cities in the world, a electric scooter shared mobility project with 3,000 bikes, 3,000 scooters, electric scooters in Madrid. Our capacity as a big company to launch that project and be more aggressive than most of our competitors, smaller companies, startups in most cases, with lesser capital, with less experience, with less almost everything other than probably drive, which they have as much, is a huge advantage. I mean, we can be very aggressive, not to mention GE or any of the big companies, or even BlaBlaCar, which is possibly a big company, could be considered. So, no, I think it's within the nature, within the drive, it's within the character of the company, whether you are competitive, innovative, and capable of adapting to the new trends. There's no limitation.
What about another conundrum of complacency in this environment? Because I'm bringing us in the last 10 minutes back to that paradigm shift. That actually this is a bit of a blip. It'll get back to normal eventually. And I would put to you that that is a flawed and possibly fatal assumption to be making. That conundrum of complacency. So can we use the last 15 minutes to address that in this new paradigm shift? Dare I say, even in BlaBlaCar, you've been around long enough where you probably have a culture of complacency and conventionality. You've been in the company probably longer than most other companies you've been in. Is there a danger that actually that you need that freshness all the time? Otherwise you don't reinvent yourself.
Yeah, one of the two business books I read actually very early in my career was Jack Welch actually winning, and Only the Paranoid Survive from the Intel founders. So I think the Only Paranoid Survive is something you should apply to every company all the time. So you should look at any disruption coming your way, even as a startup, even when you've been around for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, you should look at like innovation. You were talking about mobility in cities. That space has been going extremely fast. You had Uber coming in, now you have lots of companies with e-scooters, you have the Chinese company coming with bike sharing. So if I look at what's happening in Paris, which is the same that's happening in many cities across the world, we went from essentially having pretty much nothing except the city bikes from the city of Paris. Today you have like OFO, Mobike, Bird, Line, this, that, like essentially like every corner of the street you have like a small device, electric or not, that you can jump in and move around. It's been created in 2 or 3 years. It was not there like 3 years ago, essentially. So things move very fast. I think what's interesting in, if you take the perspective of governments and countries, is making sure you don't protect the old economy for the wrong reasons. So how do you embrace disruption? And it's very interesting for us because when we launched BlaBlaCar in 22 countries, you really see the difference when people see disruption as a problem, and essentially they ask you like, what are you going to break? What are you going to, what's going to go wrong essentially when you guys enter the country? And you see governments that embrace to some extent the disruption, and they say like, how can we work together? How can you help us change some of the regulations so that you essentially we can help you grow in the country. So I think it makes a big difference. You're either going to have countries that reject disruption because they see that as a problem for for some existing players. And I would say for those countries in 10, 20 years they're going to have a problem. Because today if you look at some of the, I would say that if you look at the next 10 years, technology is going to play a big role. I mean, look at the biggest company from the valuation point of view, they're technology companies. It's Apple, it's Amazon. I'm not sure we would have said that 10 or 20 years ago, that the first company to reach $1 trillion is actually a Silicon Valley company or a Californian company doing tech. Look at China and the companies they're building in China with Alibaba and so on. It's huge, right? So unless, taking maybe the view of a European, unless Europe bets with all the countries in Europe on technology, Europe is going to become a museum in 20 years.
I'm not letting Alex and Jose off that particular challenge of the paradigm shift, but let me just pick up, if I can, Vasyl, that one particular point we've just heard from Nicolas there, the danger of protecting the old economy. With your innovation part and what you are investing in here, do you still feel there's an instinct here to protect the old economy, or is it now moving inexorably in a very clear direction of travel, which is we've got to do new things?
Well, you know, we should not protect the old economy. We definitely should continue developing the new economy. And I would like to turn to the ecosystem of Ukraine in this issue also. Because let us take a look at this. Currently, the companies are not working, our company doesn't work with the state-owned industries. We do not work with the budget companies. We do not provide any services. We do not sell anything from them. We do not buy anything from them. We do not ask for the help and support from the state. We create our own product. But in this situation, like this, I would like to pay your attention that if we would like to create the ecosystem in a faster pace, we need the support of the state. A good example of Israel. Israel is investing. It invests invests $100 million for the early development of startups, understanding that 90% of that will fail. But what they do, they create teams, they create products, the people will draw some conclusions, the people will learn on the failures, and they will start a new project that might be more successful. And this is a good example. That is why Israel is #1 country on startups per capita. America, it might be bigger, and so we understand that is more startups in the United States. The same can be in Ukraine. To facilitate it, to fasten this, empower it, Ukraine has to give some money for that. What as a young, talented person is, of course they are different from our generation, because the young person doesn't want to buy a car already. They don't want to buy an apartment, and I can see that in my businesses, in my partners. What they want to rent out, they want to work here half a year, then go and find another opportunity to go to London, then maybe move to the US, and then again come back to Ukraine. They don't want to be anchored to one place. But for them to be joining us in faster pace, we have to create the opportunities. There's no other options for us. And thus we have to develop the ecosystem. And if the states pay attention to that and give a slight push to that, we will develop the ecosystem faster.
This challenge, you have to develop your internal corporate systems faster as well. You've got to be nimble in the way you both described. But lay down the challenge for all the delegates here before they go to their own separate groups and can talk much more openly about, lay out the challenge which everyone has to face, whether you're from a legacy company, whether you're from the developed world, or whether you're in the developing and emerging economies as well. That things are not going to be the way they've been, and they're changing incredibly quickly.
In essence, I believe it's a question of the culture of the company and what type of culture the leadership of the company establishes. So say what you will about the new generation of workers that are entering companies like ours, that are entering companies like GE. Some people say that they don't want to pay their dues. Some people say that they're impatient. Some people say that they expect instant gratification. What I say is that they expect access. They expect to be able to speak to anyone in the company about their ideas and raise challenges and constructively try to make the company a better place. I think that technology and social media have a huge amount to do with that. At GE, for example, you no longer need an appointment to see the CEO. You can send an email, you can send a text, you can post on our internal tools that we have to provide feedback to senior management. And it's a question about whether you welcome that type of constructive challenge and allow everybody to participate. I talked earlier about additive technology. That started in GE with a group of kids who had just graduated from Purdue, Illinois, and Indiana, and who decided to challenge the aviation business to embrace 3D printing and push forward with that. That's the kind of courage that you need in a company for new entrants into our culture to challenge it to be better.
Did they want to push faster than instinctively others wanted to push?
Sure they did. And I think the question is whether, again, mixing speed with being realistic, with being sensible. There's no one single template for every type of innovation that you do. It depends on what we're talking about. When you're in as many different kind of businesses as we are, I tell you that the ecosystem for healthcare, where you're dealing with safety and patients, is different than the ecosystems of some of our other businesses where you can be a little bit more experimental. So again, it just depends. I mean, I'm not trying to avoid the answer to your question, other than saying, rather than try to come up with all sorts of different rules that apply to different situations, focus on culture. Have you instilled a culture within your company where people feel comfortable challenging what they don't believe is being done correctly and challenging what they believe has not been done fast enough? And if you have a culture that encourages the right type of constructive challenge in those areas, you can make it for 120.
But that has to come from the top, doesn't it?
It has to come from the top, but it also has to permeate throughout the organization and work in the middle too. Because the CEO can say anything that she or he wants, but if someone's manager doesn't embrace that spirit, it's not going to go very far.
What do you do with the resistors and the obstructors further down in this environment?
You know, to be honest with you, they don't last too long anymore.
You identify them?
Yes. Well, they identify themselves pretty apparently, to be honest with you.
Okay, Jose.
You tried to bring them to your camp once, twice, the third time you take them out. Yeah, but the question here is the old question of how do you survive. I think there's...
But it's still so relevant today.
Well, it is more relevant than ever. It's more relevant than ever. Paradigm shifts in business used to take 25 years. Now they take 5 years. So you're either adapting to the changing environment on a daily basis, or you're dead. So from leadership from the top, how do you challenge that? How do you try to survive and thrive and prosper? I obviously have my own formulas, but I would resort to the old formulas, to the traditional ones. One is you have to avoid contempt. And you were mentioning you have to go to the office every morning feeling very worried, very worried. I mean, you have to be almost certain that that you're going to fail unless you are extremely capable and extremely daring. So worry is a good source of avoiding contempt. And then you have to think, at least that's what I try to do. There is a 10-year goal and then there's a 6-month goal. All in between is very changing. You can't predict for that. You have to have a very clear view of what you want in the 10-year goal and your 10-year perspective, and you have to adapt very quickly to your 6-month challenges. In between, be flexible, be ready, be active, try to bring as much talent, challenging talent around you. But there's no solution. There's no clear solution. Just be worried.
But I've got to press you. A 10-year strategy in this environment, does that, when you think...
It lasting. Let me tell you one. It is.
When you think where we were 10 years ago, much of what is happening today was never on the agenda.
Well, in my case, there are 100 things that were not on the agenda. I mean, I could even count them. However, there are the main guides that I was seeing, that I was looking at 10 years ago, are not only still here, but with more strength than ever. So environmental elements, climate change, need to attract talent through giving your colleagues a sense of purpose in life. I mean, working for money is fortunately something that's no longer the only element. In fact, it's probably not the most important element in young people's decisions in choosing a job. So if you are bringing the opportunity to, apart from a salary, naturally you need to pay the rent. If you bring the opportunity to go to bed every night with a sense of having produced some good to society, that's a huge advantage. And that was exactly the same 10 years ago, or 20 or 50. So some things stay. So long as you have your 10-year goals clear, and of course, if the 10-year goals are right, if you've got them wrong, then you're dead. But if you're right, then adapt to whatever comes along.
Nicolas, your last thought, picking up Alex's point of culture.
Yeah, so I think, maybe just to respond to that, I mean, clearly culture is key, so you need a culture of innovation, and I was talking about only the paranoid survive, which is exactly what you describe when you say you come to the office and be worried. It's the same, like you look at the trend. I think what's interesting is you do need a long-term plan, right? Otherwise you have no vision as a company, you have no long-term view as a company, yet you need to be super agile. And I think what's interesting is also to look at like big technology trends that might have nothing to do with your industry and try to see if they're going to intersect your industry at some point. So if you think of mobility in cities, you were talking about e-scooters or Uber and all these things. If you think of what enabled that, it has nothing to do with mobility or cities or anything like that. It's actually almost the iPhone and the fact that now you have a smartphone and you're geolocated and you can create like a whole on-demand industry. So now you have like Uber Eats and Deliveroo, and all of that has been created very, very quickly and disrupt an entire industry, whether it's the taxi industry or food delivery industry. So it's always interesting to look at these technology vectors and how they're going to disrupt your industry, and watch that very carefully. And I think the failure of most large companies is to react when the thing is already big, and typically it's too late, right? So when a BlaBlaCar or Airbnb or these companies have like tens of millions of people already signed up and using the product, actually it's pretty hard to catch up because you have very strong network effects. So it's very important to, even for us at our scale, to understand like, okay, what are the next technology vectors that would make what we do, so long distance carpooling, a lot better. So things like blockchain and so on, like how do you think of that?
Alex, you want to come in, and then I'm going to Vasyl for the last, no, okay, you're holding your microphone. Vasyl, when you reflect on where we've got to in the last 2 hours, and the kind of things you've heard, particularly from the visitors to Ukraine, and the realities you see here, and I go back to what I quoted right at the beginning, a more challenging global environment for emerging markets, according to the World Bank, literally 2 days ago, and Ukraine sits in that. How do you, with your enormous investments and your ambitions, how do you see the next, I'm not going to say next 10 years, but maybe the next 10 months, because of the significant changes which are happening globally? And we haven't talked about geopolitics, but globally in the economy, and the warnings that are out there.
Well, it's a very difficult and challenging question. I don't know how to say if what we're going to have in 10 months, because we have elections in 6 months, so I don't understand what we're going to have in 10 months. Well, it all depends on who's going to win the elections, actually. But I do hope that no matter who's going to win the elections, Ukraine will still continue its development path. And I would like to wish to myself and to wish to all of the people who are here. So for us not to say that we're just exchanging the experience and something we can use and something we can use for ourselves and something we can share the other skills. The most important for us to be successful, do not wait for the aid. If you will have some aid and support from the outside, it will be a good bonus, a premium for you, because the development, economical development and economical success of Ukraine depends on you, depends on how successful you are as the small entrepreneur sitting here.
Thank you for your patience and stamina. It is coffee time, break time, but this is really the hors d'oeuvre for a significant number of discussions and debates, which will be more interactive on these critical issues. But can I thank Vasyl, Alex, Jose, and Nicolas for their insights, bringing to you the challenges of this paradigm shift, this new normal of unthinkables and unpalatables, and what's going to happen the day after tomorrow, as opposed to maybe in 6 or 7 years' time. And I thank you all very much indeed, and I hope we've spirited you and told you you can thrive on change, not just be worried about it. Thank you.